Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Thoughtful Talent Show. I'm Jen Werner of Jen Werner Coaching.
And I'm Chad Aaron of Talent Teams Consulting. And today we are joined by another wonderful fellow coach, Amy Shuman. Amy is a Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach, like Jen and I are. Um, Amy is a professional certified coach with the International Coaching Federation and is currently serving as the Workforce Development Director for the Division of Student Affairs at UC Davis. She holds a master's in leadership and is passionate about empowering people to create positive workplace culture. She comes to us today from her office just outside of Sacramento, California. Thank you for joining us, Amy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Amy.
Yay.
Yes.
It's so great to have you here. So we've invited Amy on because we are talking about the Clifton Strengths Talent theme of focus today. And Amy, remind us where this falls for you in your top 5.
Yeah, it's my number 5, though I did retake the assessment at one point and it moved up to my number 2. I stayed with my original
Okay.
results because it felt more like me, but both times it was in my top 5. So I feel like that's worth mentioning, but it is my number 5. That's the report I use.
That's
Awesome.
great.
Awesome.
Well, that's wonderful because Chad and I, it is maybe more in our supporting strengths and than our dominant. So Chad, where does this fall for you?
This is number 18 for me, so it is well into my supporting themes.
Okay. Yeah, and it is 13 for me. So again, yes, definitely within my supporting themes and not part of my dominance. So with that, we're gonna have Amy here sharing her insights about how her focus shows up in her. And before we do that though, Chad, can you share with us what Gallup has to say about focus?
Sure. So Gallup defines this talent theme as follows. People exceptionally talented in the focus theme can take direction, follow through, and make the corrections necessary to stay on track. They prioritize, then act. And I think we're going to hear a lot of that from Amy today. I've had a chance to meet Amy in person. We met briefly at the Gallup Summit this past summer in 2023. And I could already tell that a lot of that focus is part of her thinking. So I'm really excited that she's here to join us and help us explore this theme a bit, especially since it is one that Jen and I don't have in our top 10 or especially top 5. So, Amy, as we help people start to understand this theme, and we understand you're just one perspective, but it can be helpful to have somebody experience as a coach and somebody that has lived with this sort of focus theme even before you probably put words to it. Just help us understand what this theme looks like, how it plays out in your life. We'll get into the theme dynamics and positives and negatives of the theme, but just walk us through some of the behaviors or ways that people might recognize this in you. What does that look like for you personally?
Yeah. Well, before I had the term focus and this label focus, I probably would have described this tendency as being goal oriented. I've always been goal oriented. I always have multiple goals. I work with some people in coaching, and for some people, goal setting is not fun or natural, or it could be stressful. But for me, I'm always setting goal, always. And I've been like that for as long as I can remember. So I think part of focus is um, that having a goal that I'm working toward that I can execute, something I can make happen. And then the other part might be in how I work. It's not that I can just focus on anything at any time and eliminate all distractions. Similar, like you think about people with high positivity, it's not like negativity doesn't affect them. In fact, they may be even more sensitive to negativity. I'm very sensitive to distraction. And so
Okay.
I can go into hyper focus mode, but there have to be some conditions to support that. And so I will work in kind of intense bursts. And that's one way that my focus shows up. And I also sometimes have to shut out distractions. Like I know open door policy is this very popular leadership kind of thing. And I get it as a concept, but there are times where I'm a closed door working through do not interrupt me kind of person. And that's one of the ways my focus might be observed by other people.
Okay. Okay.
Nice. You had shared with me before we were talking about achiever versus focus, and I thought that your insights were really interesting about that. Can you share with us and our audience?
Yeah, I most of the achievers that I know and people with, achiever in their top five, there I've noticed there seems to be a cadence to their work. Like it's kind of steady and there's something always happening. There's always some movement toward it. And for me, focus is more in bursts. And it'll come in these kind of my own coach. I have this coach, Micah, and she gave me this phrase that I work in sprints. And
Mm,
so I don't have to always be doing something. I'm always thinking about it maybe, but the actual executing for me and the way my focus works comes in these intense periods of work versus a kind of steady, more disciplined kind of routine.
yeah, and I loved that, the differentiation. They're both executing themes, so we're both working towards something. But like you said, with that, like those smaller bursts, whereas achiever is really like trying to achieve something of every minute of every day. Like there's some little nugget we're after, like little
Yeah.
Pac-Man,
Yeah.
across the screen kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Well, my
Yeah.
husband has achiever number one, and I notice he can have a schedule and a list and do
Mm,
the things on the list. Or if he goes to the grocery store, he'll get the things on the list. And me, I have a goal, but how I get there, it's not quite as linear. And I kind of I kind of don't like to have to I like to work on times where I feel
mm,
this focus motivation come.
Mm.
It's not
mm-hmm.
constant where I feel like I can just force myself to power through something, but it comes in these kind of waves. And when they come, I want to shut everything out and just do that work. So that's what focus looks like for me. And I notice at least many of the achievers in my world, they have a much more planned out approach to getting
Yeah.
things done.
That's
So
really
cool.
interesting. So does it provide you like that? I'm just thinking about motivation. Is the motivation the goal? Is the motivation just an internal driver? Um, Talk to us a little bit about that, because this is one I have not run across a lot myself. So I'm really interested in understanding some of the nuances behind how this focus comes out, or how it gets into those burst stages that you were talking about.
Yeah, for me, I think when you read the standard definition, they talk about prioritizing. I think that's kind of the key. Not everything can exist in my focus beam because there's not enough time and energy for me to focus on everything. So there has to be some prioritizing. I imagine it's different for different people. I know later you're probably going to ask me about how it pairs with other themes, but I'm going to add that I have significance in my top five. And so I will tend to focus on things that I think are going to have a significant impact or that they're
Mm,
particularly important and meaningful for some reason. And so I kind of pick something called a focus project, or at least that's what I would maybe describe it to somebody else. So what I focus on, the motivation often comes from um, the feeling that I'll have when it's all finished. But it's
mm,
everything.
Okay.
It's the entire package. Like the satisfaction comes from the entire thing being done. And I can't really rest. I kind of imagine like if focus was like a person, it would be like waving its arms, waving. It's like, hey, don't forget about me, don't forget about me. And I'm going through my life every day, and I'm thinking, yep, yep. I still remember, I still remember. And then finally, when it all comes together, whatever this thing is that I'm putting all my focus into, the thing that I'm thinking about when I'm walking down the street, the thing that I'm thinking about before I go to bed, the first thing I think about, it's a consuming thought. And when it all comes together, it's like that focused person can like sit down and
mm.
like be
Okay.
happy.
Nice.
So yeah, the motivation can come from a lot of places, depends on what it is. But I like to think other strengths coaches say this too. Strengths are about how, not about what. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
focus is how I get there, but it could be applied to many different things.
Okay. There was one question that has always, I don't know if perplex is maybe too strong a word, but I've always been curious about, especially when looking at sort of the longer standard definitions. And that's available on Gallup's website. And if you take the assessment, you get it. But there seems to be a very strong focus on goals, and you've already brought that up a little bit. but the goal, like once you're sort of focused on that goal, it can be very hard when things change. And I'm just wondering what happens when goals dramatically change for you. With that focus going so strong in one direction, if somebody all of a sudden moves that goal to 90 degrees to your left or right, what's somebody's what's the potential reaction, or how do you deal with that as somebody with focus?
I need some Kleenex or something. This is going to get emotional.
Sorry.
It's not easy for me. And I will say that it's a lot of internal screaming. I don't know if people notice it. I think people who know me well, they do. I try not to like, put that on people, but the best way I can describe it is almost like a short circuit of my brain. Like it just like what? Like I'm just in shock almost because I am putting all of my energy into making this thing happen. And if it can't happen for some reason, I mean, pivots can be frustrating for me, but if it's completely stopped, like you cannot finish this project or it's not happening or all this, that is almost like I don't know. Like, I don't know what to do. Um, Depending on what the circumstances are. I mean, certainly the pandemic was a lot of that for, I don't know, other focus people. I mean, we all had struggles through the pandemic for lots of different reasons. But if I'm thinking about through focus, there were a lot of things that were started that didn't, they couldn't be, right, for different reasons. And so it was a really I was just I felt like I was losing my energy. I wasn't excited about stuff, but I wasn't angry at anybody. It wasn't anybody's fault. If it is somebody's, like somebody could have let me finish the project, but they decided not to, like if I felt like they didn't have to do that, it can really damage relationships for me because I'm still holding on to this thing. And I also have to be careful that sometimes it's that other people just don't remember. But my brain, for whatever reason, I don't remember everything. I don't remember everything people say. But if there's some kind of project or some kind of future task that I grab onto in this laser beam of focus, and maybe the other people just forgot, I have to really be careful and try and communicate with people because they might not realize that it's really upsetting to me. The other thing is sometimes, if you look in like, there's different words Gallup uses. I'm going to use the word basements from the old balconies and basements worksheet, but there's different words for this, but the word rigidity comes up, kind of inflexible as kind of a barrier label for focus. And I happen to have adaptability really, I think it's like 32. So there's that playing here as well.
Right.
Maybe somebody has focus and adaptability, and but for me, I joke with friends and family. I'll say something like, I don't know if I gave you the impression that I'm a kind of go with the flow person. And they usually laugh because I don't give that impression. And then I say, but I'm not. And the same talent that you like to use to make things happen cannot pivot like this. Like, it's really hard. So I try and explain that, but it can, I bet for other people, it's like, what's the big deal? We're just making a little change. And my focus is like, this is not a little change. This is disrupting my entire mental infrastructure that I had planned.
Yeah. I love that phrase, mental infrastructure. That's a good, I like that one. That's because I could hear it that taking out a specific action is removing an entire I-beam from that structure, and everything sort of collapses, or as you said, sort of short circuits. I really appreciate that perspective because I have been curious about that. I have high responsibility, and a lot of those sort of goals are set out in front of you, and I make a commitment to fulfill those. And then when either they change or they're no longer needed, that can have a similar impact of, well, wait, I promised you I'd do this. And so given that responsibility and focus, like Jen was saying, they both are executing, but they seem to execute slightly differently. And so I was just wondering what the impact of changing goals would have on somebody like yourself with high focus talents. So
Well, and with your example too, responsibility has a lot of external, right? It's
Mhm.
somebody
right.
else needs this, or I assume somebody else wants me to do this in some cases. Where for me, focus is more internal motivation, though I don't know that it always shows up like that. Probably depends what other people's top five is.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be external. It could be something I just want to do, a goal I've set for myself.
Yeah.
I can also get excited about goals other people have for me, or have, given me as ideas or something. But I don't know that it doesn't have that same tilt like responsibility does. It really needs that
Mhm.
external person
Right.
to
Yeah.
be the one needing it.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
am
it
definitely
does.
hearing a lot in your answer about intrinsic, a lot
Mhm.
of it coming from sort of a self-starter. I want to get this thing done, or this is really important to me. So I definitely appreciate the difference. I was just also wondering, like, the similarities around when goals change, they
Yeah.
Yeah.
all of a sudden shift to, 90 degrees off the side.
Yeah.
That can really, I know, throw me. And I was just wondering what that, especially given the long definition, sort of standard definition of this talent theme from Gallup. So
Mhm.
I really
Yeah.
appreciate all those examples and that sense of clarity. I know Jen has some great questions that she wants to ask about
Yeah.
sort of the positives and negatives. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and I so appreciate that you've already kind of like started down this direction. You
yeah,
talked about like warning people, like if I've given you the idea that I'm a flexible person, yeah, that's not true. So we know that we joke, we kid, but there are sometimes that our talents actually get in our way. They trip us up. They are coming on too strong and have a tendency to either damage relationships or just drag us into the ground with our responsibility. As Chad and I have talked about and joked about, we will like be dragging ourselves along to make sure that we get something done for someone else. So in
Mm.
that vein, like are there ways and times that you feel like your focus actually has worked against you rather than for you?
Oh yeah, of course. And I'll share too. Responsibility is my number 9, so I'm tracking with your responsibility comments too.
awesome. All right.
Um, but so when is it got in my way? Well, it's kind of odd because I was going to say I don't know that I'm ever really present, because focus
Mm,
has, I mean, you could look at focus and say, well, I'm so present that I'm so in the moment, I'm so invested. But it has this, and I have futuristic number 7. So it
mm,
has this future. I mean, goals are usually out there
Yep.
somewhere.
yeah.
And so I might be working on it presently, but I'm always thinking about that kind of end goal, and I can get obsessive. Like
Mm,
like I'm eating dinner, but I'm not there. I'm somewhere else thinking
mm,
about something that's going to happen
Mm.
in 3 months at any given day. Um, that's great for the project. It might not be always where I want to be for my family. and and I think they love that I like the work I do. But sometimes I wish I could just pause it,
mhm.
like just that kind of be here now kind of thing. But
Yeah.
that's not quite me. So there's that. The other thing that can get in the way, you mentioned relationships. I think I mentioned relationships earlier, is if someone's inside I keep using this like laser beam kind of metaphor. If someone's inside the laser beam working on the project with me, like it's great. We're talking, I'm checking in, we're doing like, but if they're not, it's like I kind of, you get this kind of, one single-sided kind of narrow lane going, and I can forget about checking in with
Mhm.
people who aren't part of the goal that I'm working on right now. And so that can be hard for relationships too, because it really isn't something I'm doing intentionally, but I'll get so wrapped up in something that I'm working toward
Mhm.
that it is all consuming. And so there's that. And then of course, yeah, if I can't be if someone's asking me to be more flexible than I would like to be, I could get short with people maybe, or I'm an impatient person generally. But uh, yeah, I think sometimes I don't respond well to requests for change. And so that's something that I have to balance, because I definitely don't want people to feel like they can't talk to me or they can't bring something up. But at the same time, it I don't, I like to show how can I use this in a positive way. And if people are asking me to be something I'm not all the time, then I'm not actually able to use that talent at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing out that like that if you're not in the laser, you're kind of, as far as relationships go, you're kind of on the outskirts. And I would say with all of my heavy executing themes that I have high, that happens to me as well. So I think it's part of the, I love doing work with other people. I love getting, in and working with others. I also love to work by myself. So it seems like those that I'm working with are closest to me. So I could see where, especially with focus, if they're part of that process of yours, they would be very close in that moment, but then maybe fall up to the wayside when that project ends. And not that you don't care about them still, but that they just have, you've moved on to a different laser focus at that moment, at that time.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean we can't come back together.
Right,
But
absolutely. Yeah. And what I wondered too about that was you had said too, I think you said it, that when something just stops and you can't end and there's no resolution, that there's a bit of a loss there.
yeah. Yeah, almost like I'll mourn the loss of this goal that cannot be. And then my
Yeah.
brain will start saying like, well, can I though? Is there still a way to get there? And yeah, it's emotional for me
Yeah.
when these things end.
Yeah. Okay, well let's flip it. Let's
Okay.
not be so emotional. So
Yeah,
tell me,
it's a great talent
let's
too.
let's go. Yeah, oh, absolutely. And so let's talk about those ways that this has just made you shine. This is the talent that and we know they don't all work in silos, but if we had to really put focus in the spotlight for a minute and think about like the ways that it has really propelled you towards your goals and gotten things done, what are some of those things that you just feel like this theme has really benefited your life or your work?
Yeah, well, one, I feel like I have a reputation for getting things done, like making things happen. And so I attribute some of that to focus. I think also just being able to be really clear about not just setting goals, but relentlessly pursuing them has given me a lot of
Nice.
benefits in my career and my life, and even in hobbies. I'm sort of an extreme hobbyist. Every hobby I have, I've turned like into a business. It's a whole thing. But I have to, I don't know, is it okay if I read a sentence from my report? I have it up in
Oh no,
front of me.
that's fine. Yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
So
absolutely.
this is like the understatement of the century, but it says, by nature, you may devote yourself to things that intrigue you. Sometimes your attention intensifies if you're encouraged to immerse yourself in a specific activity or topic. And like that is that is absolutely me, but like times 1,000. Like sometimes it intensifies. Yeah, it intensifies in a big way. But what happens is when I do that, I can become an expert in something because it's different than learner. People often think I have learner high, and I think it's because of this behavior. If I'm interested in
Oh,
it, I want to know everything about it, and I can, it's on my mind all the time. I think part of
Yeah.
that focus is that obsession of like, I see it all the time as a goal. And so I'm always collecting things that will help me move toward it. Um, and I enjoy like those kind of intense kinds of working times where I can just dedicate my favorite day might be for focus might be if I have one thing to do for the whole day. Like I get to really immerse myself into a topic and
Oh,
then the next
okay.
day do something different. I don't like to do the same thing every day, not like,
Yeah.
discipline, but I love the luxury of a big chunk of time. It's like just what focus loves. Yeah.
nice. Oh, that's so great.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear the differences between some of the themes because
Oh,
I
absolutely.
love very long stretches of time as well, but for a very different reason. That's where my learner loves to like go
Mm.
deep on something. But again, I'm finding it's usually a near term impact it's trying to have. Uh, and yet I'm hearing that same sort of love of long chunks of time, but for a specific big project to do
Yeah.
Yeah.
is
And
just
getting
really
it
intriguing
done in that
and
time.
getting it done. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
um that's fantastic.
I
I
even have my mug today that says, create.
There you go.
Nice.
That's what I like to do with focus. I picked it on purpose.
Nice.
Focus likes to create. It's not just about paying attention to something. It's
Yeah.
about I'm at the end, there's something to show for it. And that's what focus likes to like, look what I made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're welcome, everyone.
Well, in that vein, you're taking this hour to create with us.
Yes.
Some wonderful insights on this theme. Those have all been fantastic observations and realizations around this theme. Jen and I have both said, these first couple questions have been very focus driven, that, just as this theme on its own. I want to expand the circle a little bit now and think about, if we're thinking about this theme operating with other themes. I have sort of two questions around this. We'll tackle each one on its own, but I'm curious if there are themes that you find you sort of loop in a lot more frequently than some of the others. And you've already listed off some of your other talent themes, and you've mentioned significance already. But are there other themes that you're looping into almost accelerate the success of your focus talents, your focus theme?
Yeah, probably the one I say pairs with it really naturally and really nicely is my number 7, futuristic, because focus is about future goals, and futuristic, like I like to imagine what it'll be like when it's done. Like, and the vision of that propels focus, and focus needs to see something. Like, what is it that what's the goal? And so futuristic can help show, here's the goal. You can, like, I can see it.
Nice.
Significance helps with prioritizing. I think other ones, I do have responsibility, like I mentioned, and achiever, both my 9 and 10. So, when it comes to the executing part, but I feel like focus has these two elements. It's the vision, goal, priority, and then the making it happen. And so I have all these influencing themes. So I haven't talked a lot about my top 4 other than significance, but so I have all these influencing themes that kind of are creating this whirlwind of motivation of like how this is going to give impact to my work and these kind of things. And then underneath that, I have in my 6 through 10, I have some real executing kind of power themes to like make that happen. So, and focus is right in the middle at number 5. So I think focus is the thing that pulls together the vision and the execution and makes it possible. So it's using all of the themes, but I think futuristic and significance are probably the two that feel like they are like right up next to it.
Yeah,
nice. Okay. And then in that same sort of vein, we all, well, especially us as coaches, know that our themes can sort of get away from us sometimes. Jen and I have had long conversations around our deliberatives being very risk aware and where that leads us. And that can, if you let it go long enough, it'll take you into some dark places. And so sort of that kind of rabbit hole metaphor, just diving in and going maybe a little too far. I'm wondering if there are themes you lean on to help bring your focus out of that rabbit hole, out of that overpowering version of focus. And I ask this question because, especially for someone learning about focus, they may start to realize they have some of these behaviors that go way too far, and might be looking for some tools to help them bring it back a little bit more in balance. I was just wondering what themes you lean on that maybe others might be able to also see in their reports, be like, oh, I can lean on that one, or I can lean on that one in the same sort of way.
Yeah. So my number 1 is communication. And I feel like it's like, if I think of strengths as tools, it's the duct tape of all the tools. Like it's easy for me to use. It's the first place I start. It works on lots of things. So one way I would help is trying to communicate to other people. I feel like that's a good starting place. So, or even to myself, saying I love to be coached, and I'm a verbal processor. So sometimes I have to use my own communication to say out loud, what is it that's bothering me so much? And then once I can see it, then I might be able to pull myself in. So communication is one that I use for everything I can use communication for, I do. some of the other ones might be the two I mentioned before as being really like buddied up with focus, significance, and futuristic, but they can also realign or calibrate the focus because significance can help with importance of like, well, how important is this compared to, or what's the bigger picture? But significance and futuristic together is like, what's the bigger picture that we're talking about? So if I'm in the weeds of this one thing isn't happening the way I want it to, the significance and futuristic are zoom out kind of themes.
Okay.
And focus is a zoom in.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, like pull us back out. And sometimes just having that different perspective can help me move forward. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes like focus wins, but I think, yeah, those ones they really do work in conjunction with focus in a way to help me see the bigger picture, and then, check in with my feelings and say, okay, what's my next step now that I can kind of see beyond what I was hyper focusing on.
Nice.
So that brings me to a question I'm wondering about when the project stops, and it didn't stop because you wanted it to stop. It stopped because this can't happen anymore. Where does that focus go?
Well, I believe that you can't ever stop these strengths. Like, they just have to be redirected. So for me, maybe there's a backup project I can do. But sometimes I have to take it completely out of the arena. Like, so say it's a work project. Most of these ones in my head, I'm thinking these are probably work projects. But I can use focus at home too. So if something happened where a project got stopped at work, I may need a little bit of time to regain my motivation and perhaps my composure too. But while that's happening, I might put my focus on something personal, like, okay, I can't control what's happening here, but I can start planning our family vacation, and I can put my focus there for a little while. I tend to like the goals that are work related, and I'm really fortunate that I love the work I do, but I can put focus towards something else. Sometimes sometimes my family is like, they don't want all that focus on something. Like, then now it's like, okay, now you're in doing everything here, and like, why don't you focus on something at work? So it's a balance, but I think it can be redirected, and it's better for me to redirect it than to try and say, well, I'm just not going to have any goals. I mean, what is that?
Sure.
Like, that's not me, and I won't last that way. So I'll find a new goal, but if I've really been I don't know, affected by whatever this thing was that stopped, I might pick like what I might call like a safer goal, one that I have more control over the outcome. So like a low stakes, like I can focus on planning this little family event because really it's unlikely that it's not going to materialize, right? So, and then I can build myself back up to doing those big projects.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
My activator does a lot of that pivoting, and Chad, you probably knew I was going to
Pivot's
go there
a
with
great
it.
word.
Yeah.
Because there is something about that. Like, if there's nowhere for this energy to go, it has to go in something. And so, like, for me, when I like, the executing is definitely the issue. And if something happens and I can't work on that anymore, I have to redirect all that energy into something else in order to just be okay. Otherwise, I feel very off tilt. And it sounds like your focus really does that with you as well. Like, when those changes come like out of left field, you're like, oh, wait, what? The glitch, the computer
short
glitch, like,
it's like a
short
glitch.
circuit.
Like, it's like I just kind of, I can't function. And yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I can just try and use a different strength altogether, but it's, maybe like, okay, well, maybe I'll tap into my number 8 later and just go and catch up with a friend from a long time ago. And maybe that will help build up my soul again. But yeah, the energy will find a place. So I like to try and give it a productive place that is helpful to me before it, goes wild and finds something that I don't want to focus on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd like to take this over just because I know Jen and I have had a lot of conversation about our activator. Go listen to the, not you necessarily, Amy, but all of our listeners should go listen to the activator, because the same sort of thread is very
Yeah.
apparent in the activator.
I love activator.
Yeah, Jen,
I do
you've often
too.
said about certain family members ask you to go activate on something else now,
Yes.
please.
Go
Like
activate
just
somewhere.
Yeah.
just you need to take
and
that
that's-
energy someplace. And so I love hearing, you
Yeah.
know, not to make this about Jen and activator, but the same sort of tip
Go
and
focus on something else.
suggestion for you, you know, that Amy, you're bringing to the forefront here of, if you've got focus and you can't necessarily complete the thing that you were focusing
Yeah.
on, the same sort of tip applies, as just kind of find that low stakes activity that you can focus on and know that there's a very high likelihood of seeing that to success. So I that's why I was
Thanks,
grinning the whole
Jen.
time that Amy was talking, because I knew Jen was like, yeah, this is my
Yeah.
activator. And then I just want to emphasize that the same sort of behavior shows up for both of, you can make the best of both of them. They just need redirection. And yeah,
And
I
this
think
is
it's
really
just
interesting for
helpful.
me because activator is, I think it's my number 14. I've always thought it should be higher. And this conversation is
Yeah.
actually like, well, maybe it's a little bit of this focus. The one though I get asked to turn down the most if we're talking about strengths, which I haven't mentioned at all on this one, and it's the one I lead with, but it's not the one we're showcasing today, is maximizer. And so the comment I'll get the most is, stop maximizing this.
Oh, yeah.
It is fine. So maybe it's a little bit of mix of that maximizer focus that feels like activator. So anyway, that's interesting for me because I'm always like, I feel like activator should be higher for me.
Yeah.
But maybe
and I
it's
tell
these.
Chad all the time, like the activator at 5 might as well be at 1. When it's on, like I cannot calm it down. I have to, like Chad said, I have had a family member say to me, go activate on something else. Like I'm hovering, I'm like there, and I'm like, let me in, like
We don't want to
put
be
me in,
activated.
coach, kind of thing. Yeah, no, exactly. And they're like, go away, you know, like I got this. So it's just funny when you were saying like your family's like maybe doesn't want that much intense focus. Like I was thinking, I was exactly where you were, Chad. Like go focus on something else. Please find someone else to focus on.
Yeah, and I said my family. I really just mean my husband. But I'll see if he listens to this later. He's like, stop talking about me on this podcast.
My family member was my husband also, who tells me to activate. I love this. So in that vein, you know, we're talking about other people, and I actually have spent a little bit of time after like looking at your top 5 and you talking about futuristic and your focus together. I went looking through others I've coached, and I found like 3 out of the 5 of them all had futuristic in their top 5. And I was like, oh, how amazing is that? Like the grouping of those two together. And so when I think back to these people, they have like this mixture of the strategic thinking talents with their focus, almost all of them. And I'm like, oh, what a wonderful blend to pull together. Like you said, always like goal setting, future forward. And I was just wanted to like, I guess, commend you, applaud that like ability in you, because I think it's really wonderful. And it was just so very eye-opening to me to go back and look at these other people I've coached who have it also. And I was like, oh yeah, this was definitely like going on with them as well. So yeah, just thanks for sharing all of that. Do either of you have like an example of others that you've coached that have focus high that maybe shows up a little differently than what we've seen in Amy?
Amy, I'm as our guest, I'm gonna let Amy go first because
I've been talking so much.
We like that.
You can go, Chad.
Right. So my answer is actually be very brief. So I'm not sure how much of a get off the hook I'm going to provide here. I'll be honest. I was going through the names of people that I have coached and trying to find people that have focus in their top 5, and of the something like 500 or 600 people that I've had in workshops, I only have 20 people that have even had it in their top 5. And so, and those have been in workshop situations. So I actually, out of the whole list, I don't actually have anybody that I've actually coached for a long period of time with focus in their top 5. So I really don't have that much to contribute, only to, with the exception of saying, that in general, this is a relatively rare-ish talent theme to have. I mean, I don't think it hits it. I don't think it sits in the statistical analysis that Gallup has done in the past of like the 5 most rarest, but it is not. I wouldn't say it's
Super
that far
common.
off. It's probably in that bottom 10 or 15 themes that people likely have in their top 5. So I would just say in that vein that if you've got somebody like Amy with focus, you've got a true gem, and it's something to really pay attention to and engage, because that if you're like me and have picked up on sort of the intensity of this theme and the intensity that can bring, that is so amazing, and has this sort of self-starter, self-motivated, intrinsic motivation kind of tone to it. I think that's fantastic for a team or organization to have. So that's going to be my only comment. So I don't have anybody specifically that's extremely off what you're sharing, Amy. I am curious. I know at UC Davis you got a fairly good sized community there that you probably work with. Do you have any examples of somebody else with focus that has maybe come across as a little different than your own version?
Yeah, similar. I don't meet a lot of other top 5 focus people. I do know some, in the interest of like, I'll just generalize some thoughts about coaching people with focus. I think depending on what the rest of the top 5 are, it can definitely look different. You may have somebody who's even more into the executing realm, or like your example earlier, maybe somebody who's really into the strategic realm, and what does that do to the focus theme. I think though, what I was going to say is when you're coaching somebody with focus, it might feel different, is they may not need help with like the goal setting part. Like we might like have that covered, which a lot of other people come to coaching for that, or keeping on track, right? Like that's something I get asked for by other people who maybe don't have focus in the top 5 is, wow, like you brought it back together, or you kept track of all these different things and kind of put it into a funnel. But where people with high focus, where at least for me, this is true also, I think that the open-ended questions of coaching that open up perspective, and that can be really valuable, because we may be really defined on the goal, but missing something. And so coaching, it might feel a little different than coaching somebody whose whole objective is to come up with this goal. Well, we're starting with the goal, and we're sort of like, okay, are we on the right track? What else do you need to consider to keep moving toward that? How will you feel when this thing is accomplished? What's next for you? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think different people have different intensities in terms of that interruption. Like some people need certain circumstances to work, and it might look a little different. And I mentioned there's somebody out there, I'm sure that it's possible, who has adaptability and focus, and that I bet that would look totally different than mine.
Yeah.
We would like to see that. That would be
Yeah,
cool.
I know. Maybe, I mean, it's got to be. I've met people with all different kinds of what I would, call like unlikely pairs. There's got to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's taking advantage of or building on the fact that it is relatively rare. The question I want to ask is that, given that somebody might not run into somebody with focus all that often, I'm curious if you, Amy, and Jen, I want to come to you with this as well. I have my own take, but I'm always interested to expand the dictionary a little bit. What images come to mind that people might be able to use as sort of an entry point to understanding this theme? If our listeners have listened to any of our other episodes, we've always done this with themes, because it's a nice way to sort of have that entry point to understand it in sort of a picture way. We've on occasion used pop culture references, but often, household objects and so forth. I'm just wondering if there's an image that you use, especially with all the coaching you do at UC Davis and some of your private coaches, private consultants. What images do you go to when you start to try and explain this theme to others?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the word picture, and the first thing that comes to mind with focus is a little literal, but like a lens for a camera, because you have to focus a lens. But I think it's a good metaphor. I'm also one of my hobbies gone wild is photography, so I'm a photographer too. Um, so I like that metaphor. But there's something about, looking through this kind of narrow thing. You can already see in your sight what it is you want, but you're kind of fine tuning it. And then I
Mm.
like the photography metaphor too, because with the executing domain, it's not just about looking at the object, it's taking a picture of it. Maybe you print it and put it on the wall, and you have maybe my maximizer now is like, and then you do this and you do this, and you have this a gallery of the photo. But it's focus is with an intent to create or an
Mm.
intent to do something, but to be able to do it, it's blocking everything else out so that you're dedicating your attention to this one thing. And I like that metaphor too, because there might be like something happening right over here that you're not, or maybe there's even a more beautiful thing here, but that kind of calibrating. I have like walked into lakes, I have tripped over rocks, taking pictures, because that focus of focusing on the goal, that future
Yeah.
focus, but also in that moment of being so focused that everything else kind of stands still. So that's my focus metaphor.
Nice.
Yeah. Nice.
Jen, do you have one?
I really I do, but it's not right. Like there isn't an end goal, and except for maybe where's Waldo? So it's like this like search and find kind of thing. Like, and I think you shared with me before too, like they have those little lists in the back of the book, and so you could check it off. My achiever loves that. That you collected all the things, but maybe that you're, is so engrossed in it that you don't hear other people. It's that like anything that pulls you in, that you, like Amy said, lose your surroundings, lose what's around you, that like actual pure focus of something. So I went more towards that, like searching for the guy and finding him, but I love Amy's, that like having the end tangible result, like actually executing, finishing something.
Nice.
I like that one
Nice.
Yeah.
a lot better than my Where's Waldo.
Well, I mean, it's good imagery, but I think at least for me, I'm not searching with focus. I know what it is.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah,
have to make it happen. Um, but yeah, certainly
that's
that
cool.
flow state reminds me, if you like Where's Waldo, like I don't, it frustrates me. So
Right.
I'm like, this is not helping toward my project. So
Right.
it's a distraction.
Yeah,
Next.
yeah. There are those nasty, those inconvenient distractions, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Chad, did you have one?
Yeah, I actually did. It's kind of come to me as we've been talking, but I'm getting the image of like a TGV or a bullet train. The super fast trains.
Mhm.
I think one of the reasons it has popped to mind is, Amy, your comments about not the inability, but the time it takes for you to pivot. You will not see a sharp turn with a TGV train. They bank those corners. I've actually had the luxury of riding in one, but they bank those corners, but they also don't make too many stops. So like Amy, that long, intense and burst, there's a sense of speed that I'm sensing from a lot of Amy's answers. So there's very minimal stops along the way, and that you do end up having an end goal. You've started at one station, you're going to go to another major hub.
Yeah.
There's not going to be a whole lot that happens in between other than pure speed, and you're on a single set of tracks, because the TGV trains don't have a ton of branch points because of the speed at which they travel. And so that one has come to mind as we've been talking, and I think it's going to be one that I sort of lean into when I come across those few people I might coach with focus, or trying to help others understand it. But I've loved
I love
yours as
that.
well. Yeah, I
Yeah.
loved yours, Amy, of that idea of the create from your mug, that you have an intention. You've got a photographic subject out in front of you. Even though there might be another, beautiful mountain behind them, or to the side
Yeah.
that you're not going to worry about at this moment. and that falling away, that flow of everything else, those distractions on the side kind of evaporate, and you're in that moment. So I think we've got three great examples. And Jen, I wouldn't discount your Where's Waldo too fast. I'm sure that's going to resonate with somebody. So
Yeah, a different focus version than
Right.
mine,
yes,
I'm
exactly,
sure.
exactly.
Yeah.
But I do think that bullet train, that one resonated with me because, and that feeling of like, once you say go, like I'm
Yeah.
going.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Once you greenlit this project, like don't tell me to stop, don't tell me to
yeah,
turn. It will be
Pivot.
very difficult. So I
Yeah.
like
yeah.
that. I like that one. I may use that one myself to help explain to other people what's going on in my brain.
Yeah.
Do too.
Um,
Oh, awesome. So we're going to take this to like back to, like when we think about those who, how we can best interact with those who have focus. Um, being that you have it high, what advice could you give maybe to team leaders or peers to help someone who has focus really give and offer their best contribution to the team? What are some ways that we as like bystanders of those with focus can actually help you, bring out what you need, give you what you need?
Yeah, well, everybody's a little bit different, so I think of it as, an opportunity for a conversation. But some things you might ask about are, what conditions do you do your best work? I mean, that's a good question for anybody. But with
Mhm.
focus, if you know they have focus, asking what helps you to focus? What helps you to go into that kind of deep power mode
Yeah.
of executing? And my guess is they may say, I need uninterrupted time. I used to
Mhm.
call my work from home days, which I used to only work from home on Fridays, and I called them Focus Friday. Now I work from home most of the time, and it's great for me. It's really good for my
Mhm.
focus. The other thing I notice, and I don't think, sometimes your own strengths are so close you don't see them. It was on some Gallup thing. It might have been Dean Jones. I don't know, but somebody said this: strengths are like the bridge of your nose,
yeah,
like everyone
Mhm.
else can see it, but it's too close to you. And this other sentiment that I like from Gallup too is, strengths aren't just about what you can do, they're what you can't help but do. So all this to say, I've gotten a lot of comments about my adherence to schedules and time. And I'm a natural timekeeper, and I have, different like devices here in my office to help me keep track of time and agendas for meetings and stuff. And so one of the things I tell people working with me with focus is, if we're going to have an agenda, which I think is a great idea, like let's do it. Like stick to what's on the agenda. Like
Mhm.
keep the focus in the meeting.
yeah,
And you can have me do it. I'll lead the agenda. That's fine. But depending on what the other talent themes are, people may be more or less into that. But I think for focus people, it's knowing what is the goal and
Mhm.
letting us either work toward it or we're working toward it together, but not losing sight of things, like acknowledging what we've got to do. And if we have a schedule, to kind of stick to it, because at least for me and my focus, it's really important. One of my pet peeves is, when you have an agenda and then people put in parentheses how much time each thing is going to take.
Mhm.
yeah.
Let's see if anybody working with me is listening to this. This isn't personal, but I have a red pen always. Like, I'll take my pen and I'll be in the meeting and I'll be tracking and I'll list the actual time. How long did it actually take? And then the next one, how long did it actually take? And then I'll put where we lost time. And I'm just doing that for fun. Like, no one asked me to do it. I often don't share my results, but it's like my brain can't, I'm focusing on whatever is in front of me, like I'm focusing on that. So I'd be curious if other focus people, I hardly need any, like I said,
Right.
but for me, it's very important. So maybe if you're managing a focus person too, like where are we getting off track? How
Hmm.
could we
Yeah.
stay on track? And the focus person might have some ideas.
Nice.
I've
Oh, I
said
love
I'm
that.
sensing that the play of distractions is very
Yeah.
Yes.
much there. Like tangential conversations, that's a distraction from the main
Mhm.
topic or topics on the agenda. And
Yes.
I resonate with that a lot with my responsibility. I've mentioned that, but also my deliberative. Like the risk of going off course is,
Mhm.
could be dire.
Yeah, and just because we have
But
focus, like I said earlier, just because we have focus doesn't mean we're immune to distraction. In fact, we
oh
might
right,
be more sensitive
Right.
to
Exactly.
distraction.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
those are great. Those are great
yeah.
advice, great examples of things that we can do to help others
Yeah.
bring out their focus.
I mean, there was one thing that you shared with me before, and I got reflecting on a little bit because of one of our most recent other episodes where Jen, you might be able to help me with exactly what other thing this came from, but the need for the information and filling in blanks early in the process. Whereas Amy, I think you've mentioned to me about focus needing more open space that let you fill in the blanks.
Mm.
Could you talk a little bit about that in terms of how to interact with somebody with focus of what information or what information maybe you hold back and let them figure out? Could you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, and as I'm thinking about that, I'm wondering how much of this is me and how much of this is everybody with focus. But for me, the important thing is, what is the result? Not how do we get, like, not every little thing about how we get there. Like, if I know what the result is, like, I will keep that in my mind and then I'll build it. I want freedom to work on it at the times where I feel motivated to work on it. I
Okay.
will be able, I have a ranger somewhat high also, but like pulling in all these different pieces.
Mhm.
So I think that clarity on what the goal is helpful. And anything that's going to potentially derail it, I would want to know up front. But I like, once I have focus, I think I like the trust that comes with, I will make this happen. So I just need to know,
Yeah.
what is it we want? When is it we need it by? Is there anything that I need to be aware of that could derail this thing? And then just let me go. Like your high speed train
Yeah.
analogy, right? Like give the tickets and the destination and the this, and then watch out because here I go. And if you want to be on the train, great, but this is when we're leaving and
Yeah.
be on time.
And this is the destination. We're not taking sidetracks to some other
No,
little
no
village, right? Yeah.
side stops.
Okay.
Mhm.
No, that's a different train, a
Yeah.
different strength.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this has been a
Great question.
fantastic conversation. I'm so thrilled about everything I've learned about focus. I don't know about you, Jen,
Mhm.
but I have a whole
Yeah.
other understanding now, a level of depth, and um, feel a little bit more prepared to coach people with it. I hope our listeners have gotten a lot out of this, of starting to understand maybe some of the people around them. I did want to ask you, Amy, as all good coaches do, we usually ask our coachees, and in this case, our guest, to help us wrap up the session. So I'm curious, as we've had this conversation, are there 2 or 3 key takeaways that you'd really like to maybe reemphasize, or a
Mm.
note that we didn't necessarily address directly with one of our questions that you'd really like to make sure people listening to this and starting to try and understand focus really take to heart, as sort of our way of summarizing this episode?
Yeah. Um, I think that when you think about focus, that's how I started it, was saying there's a big goal setting element. And so if you are wanting to, I mean, there's lots of executing things that can make things happen, but focus might be reserved for those kind of like distant projects, those kind of goal-like
Mm,
things where it
okay.
needs somebody who can keep it going and keep the dream alive, like keep it in sight. Um, I think also there's something really, I think it's dedication. I think there's a beautiful dedication to that. If it was important enough to be, you know, developed as this idea, this project, that focus is going to see it through in a way that really like keeps things moving. It keeps things going forward. There's also this flexibility. Like it's funny because I think I mentioned inflexibility, but with focus, they might need flexibility in how they work or where they work
Mhm.
so that they can access that. Because it is, for me, it took a lot of years to realize, oh, it's not that I'm rude, that I want to close my door. It's that I can't work without doing that at sometimes,
Mhm.
depending on what kind of thing I'm working on. And so, understanding that need that comes with focus, and that those people, they want to I don't want to generalize, but I'll say me. When I'm in that focus
Sure.
mode, it's so that I can serve others with whatever this
Mm.
product is, whatever this experience is. And the best way I can do that sometimes is retreating into this focus cave and coming out with the
Yeah.
project. Um, and I think I mentioned at the very end, but also this idea about time and the importance of time, and that, not wasting time. That might be something that I think a lot of the executing themes probably care a lot about.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And focus is no exception. Like, we have an agenda, we have something we want to work toward. And it's also okay to ask questions and get that focus person to kind of zoom out sometimes, because we benefit from that too.
Nice.
Nice. Wonderful summary points.
Amy, it's been so amazing to listen to you talk about your focus. And I want to just thank you for being open and vulnerable with us and our audience. There's so much of what we do that comes so naturally, and our talents just, like you had said before, like sometimes you don't even pick what you focus on, like your focus picks the focus, and you're so there for it. So I just want to like celebrate you, and just really thank you for being here, for being part of our show, for sharing your focus with us, and being so open and vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
It's fun to I have these I kind of reference a little bit. My top four are all influencing themes, and I feel like they get the attention all the time. So it's kind of fun for
Sure.
focus to kind of take the stage today and say, you know what, focus is powerful too, not just all these orangey yellow ones that I've got
Right.
on the top.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will echo Jen's thanks for spending so much time with us, understand this theme. We highlighted at the beginning that this does not reside too high in either of our talent lists, and
Mhm.
just to have this much better understanding of it is going to be so much of a help. And I really hope it helps a lot of those listening to understand this. Just as we wrap up, I just want to remind people that if you like this episode and also want to engage in the conversation, we really encourage you to leave comments on either our YouTube channels or our podcast that we host through Acast, and just subscribe. You'll keep hearing from great coaches like Amy that help us understand these themes a little bit better, are gracious enough to be vulnerable with their talents. So just reminder to keep engaging with us. Jen and I will be posting this on LinkedIn, and we'd love to continue the conversation there as well. So
Absolutely. And if you want to reach out to any of us, including Amy, all of our contact information will be in the show notes, so you can find it there.
And so until next time, I'm Chad Ahern of Talent Teams Consulting, encouraging you to keep playing to your strengths.
And I'm Jen Werner of Jen Werner Coaching, encouraging you to be uniquely you.
Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you on the next episode.